Good afternoon. Let me start by, as always, praying for the victims of the Key Bridge collapse and their loved ones. To all the families, we want to say that for each and every one of you, you're in our hearts, you're in our thoughts, and you continue to be in our prayers. Están en nuestros corazones, están en nuestros pensamientos, y están en nuestras oraciones. 1 week ago today, the Key Bridge collapsed. 1 week later, these families are still living a nightmare, and we need to respect their call for privacy. I also want to, as always, recognize our first responders and emergency personnel. To all of you, thank you. This morning, I received a briefing from Unified Command. Our collective response continues. And today, I'll provide a few updates on the 4 directives that I've issued to our team. As a reminder, they are, first, we need to give closure to these families. The second, we need to clear the channel and open vessel traffic to the port. Third, we need to take care of our people who have been affected by this crisis. And that means our families, that means the workers, that means the businesses, that means everybody. And fourth, we need to and we will rebuild the Key Bridge. Now first, on our recovery efforts, we need to do more work clearing the channel in order to move forward. Current conditions make it unsafe for rescue divers to return to the water, and I've said it already, and I will keep on saying it, we have to move fast, but we cannot be careless. We promised these families that we would do everything in our power to bring them closure. But also, my directive is to complete this mission with no injuries and no casualties. We have already lost 6 Marylanders. We will not lose any more. Rough weather has forced this team to pivot over the last 24 hours, but the mission and the work continues. This morning, crews were setting buoys in the rain to make sure vessels could navigate the waterways. This morning, engineers and salvage teams continued with wreckage assessments and site analysis to make sure that we have a clear understanding of the work site. This is a 24/7 operation, and that cadence, it will not stop. On clearing the federal channel and opening vessel traffic to the port, we have opened 2 temporary channels that can support commercial traffic. One temporary channel is on the northeast side of the collapse with a controlling depth of 11 feet. We opened another channel today at around 1315 or 115, and it measures 14-foot depth. These channels will support traffic from small boats, and yesterday we had 1 fuel barge, 1 scrap barge, and 1 scrap barge move through the temporary channel on the north side. And I'm thankful that after only a week after the collapse, we have pathways and channels so commercial traffic can now move through. But I do want to be clear. We are still a long way from being able to get the size and the cadence of the commercial traffic back to where it was before the collapse. So the fact is right now we're still talking about an 11-foot channel and also a 14-foot channel. And so if I can just put that in a bit of perspective. So for the Port of Baltimore, the top areas that we have here for transit and transport is actually for vehicles, both new vehicles and also heavy wheel and heavy lift vehicles. That is where the Port of Baltimore has the most significant amount of emphasis. What we're seeing right here is a visual of the collapse site. Over here is where we have the dolly. This area, everything that you see here in the black, just to get an understanding of scale, everything we see here in the black, that's 700 feet and a depth of 50. What we're talking about, so this is the main chart area, the main chapter area, and we know for all vehicles, for all vehicle transports, and also for the containers that are carrying the vehicle transports, you need a depth of at least 35 in order for the vehicles, for the new vehicles, and also the heavy vehicles to be able to move through the Port of Baltimore. This right here is 50, this right here is 50 at 700 feet. The areas that thus far have been opened up are 11 feet and 14 feet. Just as an understanding of scale and what we're talking about, both for the 11-foot channel that's now opened and the 14-foot channel that's now opening. Neither one of those two channels are on this map. Just to get a sense of the scope and the scale of what we're talking about. So we know that in order for that to happen, for example, to get those vehicles, and what's going to happen as we can then get to a 35-foot depth and a 35-foot draw, that we can start getting the larger ships back on. The reason that also becomes so important is because once you can start transporting vehicles, it's not only that it impacts the large vessels, but if you look at what happens with those vehicles, that supports the lives and the livelihoods of at least 100 longshoremen every time a large vessel can pull into the Port of Baltimore. So we have a long road ahead, but I'm grateful that because of the extraordinary work of his team and the people who are out there, that work is moving. On the third piece, we're going to take care of our people. Last week, the Biden-Harris administration accepted our request to approve the Small Business Administration's Disaster Relief Declaration, and they accepted it within hours. Today, the Lieutenant Governor, Senator Cardin, Congressman Councilmember Costello, and I visited the new Business Resource Center that's been set up as part of that declaration. And together, we had a chance to speak with Marylanders who were coming in to get the support. We also had a chance to speak with this remarkable staff. And together, we had a chance to meet people like Yaritza Perez Acosta. She's been working with the Small Business Administration since 2018. She lives in Puerto Rico, and she just came from a disaster declaration site in Rhode Island. Her work is remarkable, and I thank her for her service, and it's because of her work that she's able to see people like Casey, who has a tire business, or she's able to see people like Will, individuals like Will who own a trucking business and has 2 employees and is trying to figure out what his next steps are going to be. People like Yaritza sees them, and she supports them, and we're all grateful. We now have 2 business resource centers that are fully operational. One permanent location in Baltimore City, and the other temporary location in Baltimore County. And we will have news on a permanent location in Baltimore County soon. So to all Marylanders looking for hours and locations, please visit sba.gov and you can get all the information that you need. Yesterday, we also formed a new intergovernmental economic response team. The Lieutenant Governor will chair the first meeting this evening. And I've appointed 3 members of my staff to work with the Lieutenant Governor on that effort. Deputy Chief of Staff Manny Welch, Deputy Chief of Staff Johnny Dorsey, and Chief Performance Officer Asma Mirza. And they're working around the clock to make sure that we're taking care of our workers and our businesses and everyone affected by the economic consequences of this collapse. One of the mantras in the military we had was, mission first, people always. And that is the mindset that we are applying to this effort. I'm also working closely with the Maryland General Assembly on the Port Act. Our team has offered several amendments to that piece of legislation, and today I just briefly want to highlight 3 of them. The first, we propose the creation of a new permanent scholarship program for the families of transportation workers who die on the job. The work that these men and women do every single day is both essential and dangerous, and we must ensure that when there are tragedies like this one, that the state does not forget about their children and their families. Mission first, people always. Second, we propose flexibility in work search requirements for unemployment insurance. That way, port workers who receive unemployment insurance will be ready to return to work at the port when operations move back to normal. Mission first, people always. Third, we propose an amendment that will ensure flexibility for our Department of Commerce and our Department of Labor, because our goal is to make funding available for critical needs of workers and businesses as we move forward, mission first and people always. We cannot possibly find every answer to every problem in the next few days before session ends. But we can give the state the ability to respond, and quickly, over these next months. I also want to take a second to talk a bit about the state budget. When session began, our administration introduced a responsible budget that did not raise taxes. The House and the Senate have been moving through their process over the last several weeks to get a final budget to my desk for signature, and we are now 7 days from the end of session. So yesterday, I signed an executive order extending the legislative session by 10 days. I recognize that the House and the Senate are coming to the table with different perspectives. I know they are both working in good faith to achieve a resolution. And the parties are not that far apart. We all want to do what's best for the people of this state. So what I did yesterday was necessary that we can provide both the House and the Senate the time to find a reasonable compromise and get me a budget that I can sign. Now, fourth, on rebuilding. We cannot rebuild the bridge until we clear the wreckage. But I'm telling you, we are going to get this done. We will clear the channel. We will move the dolly. We will rebuild the Francis Scott Key Bridge. Every day, I meet more people who prove what it means to be Maryland tough and Baltimore strong. And today, we are here with Chief Petty Officer Morgan Merritt from the U.S. Coast Guard. She's in charge of the aids and navigation team. And they're the ones who help make these temporary channels navigable by commercial vessels. Her team was out in the pouring rain this morning, laying down navigation markers so ships could move through. There was nothing that was going to stop her or her team. And while she might have been born in Fort Pierce, I got to tell you today, you're a Marylander, and we're thankful for you. So in this moment, I'm going to hand it over to Admiral Gilreath, who's going to be speaking for Unified Command, and then following him, we'll be joined by Colonel Pinchasin of the Army Corps of Engineers, Secretary of the Maryland Department of Transportation, Paul Wiedefeld, Senator Ben Cardin, and the Mayor of Baltimore City, my friend Brandon Scott. I want to thank all of our additional partners for being here today. So now, I'll turn it over to Admiral Gilreath, representing Unified Command.
Thank you, Governor. Good afternoon. I'm Rear Admiral Shannon Gilreath. 1 week ago today, we were in this very room at about this time holding our very first Unified Command meetings with all the first responders that came to help in this tragedy. And so while the uniforms of some of those first responders have changed, and some of the faces of the responders have changed, their dedication has not. And I'm so proud of the folks, Governor, thank you for recognizing many of the folks at the Unified Command and taking the time to do that, sir. You and the mayor and all the officials have come by to say thank you to them. We truly appreciate that support. Their dedication remains unchanged, and we are going to get this mission done. So let me give you an update on where we are today on those priorities. So priority number one still remains to reopen the deep draft channel. And Colonel Pinchasin is going to give you some more details on the challenges of that in just a few minutes. Our number two priority is to remove the dolly from the channel. And we continue to work on that. We've got divers going down today that are still continuing to survey around the ship. We've got engineers that are working to plan how we remove portions of the bridge from the dolly as well as remove damaged containers. And our third priority is to remove the rest of the bridge from the waterway. And we continue working along those lines, led by the efforts of the Maryland Department of Transportation and their contractors. And so yesterday we had a planned lift of one of those sections. The weather has delayed that lift, and so we haven't yet completed it, but it's still in the process, and we're still working to get that done over time. We just can't do that lift in lightning, and some of those other conditions are making that challenging. But from a safety perspective, it is unsafe to operate those cranes when we don't have lightning in the area. So we're going to continue to work to do that, but we've got to do that safely. Now, as the governor mentioned, we have made progress in a couple other areas. We have reopened that northern channel that we spoke about yesterday with our first 2 barges to traffic through there. And we just reopened that southern channel today at a draft of 14 feet. We're going to continue working and planning for a third alternate channel when we get those spans that are just north of the deep draft channel removed. But that's still going to take us some time to do that. So I want to thank you again for your support. I want to turn it over to Colonel Pinchasin to give us an update on the actual challenges that we're finding with that deep draft channel and the engineering that her team and the Navy Supervisor of Salvage team and our contractors are doing on that. Colonel Pinchasin.
Notes. So Governor Moore, state partners, sir, it's a pleasure to be here today. Thank you for joining us today. Our priority remains clearing the federal channel, that 50-foot shipping channel, and that is an integrated operation for salvage operations and recovery operations. And when you mentioned earlier, sir, mission first, people always, that's exactly what that is. It's not just about the engineering. And I just, as you mentioned that, that's what came to me, because as our engineers are assessing and surveying and figuring out how they're going to lift those loads, they know in the back of their minds that they are also looking for any traces of the fallen and anything that they can recover. That is an integrated part of our effort. Mission first, people always. So thank you for inspiring that, sir. Yesterday and today, our teams are working as best they can considering the weather. Crane operations had to be paused temporarily, but they're back online now. The lightning hindered that for a little while, but as Admiral mentioned, we're able to continue in a safe fashion. We're taking every precaution we can to make sure our folks are safely operating and conducting salvage operations. The Unified Command consists of an amazing team of Department of Defense, federal, state, and industry partners from the salvage community. It is absolutely the right team to take on this challenge. And so we've implemented a very methodical, disciplined, but iterative approach where we assess and engineer and then execute. And we're getting a much better understanding of what we're dealing with by bringing in another dive team, by bringing in 3D survey capability and employing that over the last few days and getting a much better picture than what you're seeing on the skyline, and we're going to cover that there. What those 3D surveys demonstrated for us and what they're indicating is that the wreckage on the bottom of the 50-foot channel is far more extensive than we could have imagined. What we're seeing and I'll head over there here in a second, but we have portions of the wreckage that are completely collapsed. What this means is that the state of that wreckage makes it very difficult to figure out where to cut, how to put it into what we call bite-sized pieces, although the bites we've had are 250 tons. And we have crane capability that can lift more than that. So imagine these bite-sized pieces that are hundreds of tons. But to be able to do that, we have to be able to see what we're doing. And the collapse of that wreckage, it's not just sitting on the seabed, it's actually below the mud line. That makes it very difficult to know where to cut, how to lift and rig and lift. So I just wanted to make sure that we're sharing everything that we're learning, and I can help explain that a little more. Right now, all those surveys are being compiled from all our partners from across the entire effort. With each layer of survey data that we are collecting and compiling and analyzing, we're getting a much better picture of what it's actually going to take to lift that up. I can't say enough about our team. We are joined by our nation's top salvage experts and our friends from the United States Navy, our salvage experts, Supervisor of Salvage Operations, Soup Sal, here with us. We could not do that without them and without our industry partners. Cannot thank them enough, and I hope that the families know they have the absolute best team working on this for them. So if we'll head over here, I'll orient you a little to what we mean by that. So as the governor mentioned, this is a survey graphic. I know it's a little pixelated. I don't know if we can shift. You said to shift it on the screen. Okay. This is what you all have seen. I think most of you have been out on site and have seen the wreckage. You've seen spans that look like some structural integrity there. These trusses that we see, that we used to love to see, that beautiful bridge, and they're laying in the water. But as you see below the water, it starts to get messy, right? It doesn't look like that. You can't even see what that means. You don't see any structural integrity there. So while here, this area that we were proposing to cut into bite-sized pieces and be able to place them on barges and be able to transport them away, there you go. I'm fully trained now. What we're seeing in the water is that the wreckage has been completely collapsed. Some people use the term pancaked, but that's making it very difficult to even determine where to cut, how to cut. It's very dangerous for our divers to be able to go into this area. They can't see anything in front of them. This area is extremely unforgiving for them to work on. So the more data we have, the more surveys we can compile. We're completing survey data from the other side as well, and we're going to be able to put together a plan to get after this. It might change how we're going to lift this portion of the collapsed wreckage off the bottom of the seabed. You can see here, this wreckage looks still somewhat intact. We're looking here, you see, these are areas where we'll be able to cut and lift, but then as you go below the surface, 50 feet down in the water, it is not something that we're going to be able to cut through, and we don't want to put people in danger if there's going to be instability. So we are now developing our plan for that. Now, just to make sure folks know, this is something that the salvage community knows how to do. That we are marshaling equipment to enable this additional type of lift. So that's when I say that we have the right people on the job figuring out how to get after this, that is 100% true. For us, it looked very, I don't want to say clean. I don't want to make it sound like it's not as complicated, that this is going to be easy. It is absolutely still complex. Salvage operations are not an easy task. The magnitude of this is enormous, as you've all seen. But as you go deeper in the water, this does not represent what's underneath the water. So we thought it was really important for you to understand what our divers are dealing with and what the courage they have to risk as they're conducting operations. We are taking every precaution to keep them safe. We are making sure that when we send them in, that they are guided properly, but it's very methodic, and we have to do it very carefully. And I know that takes time, but we're very thankful for the support from the governor, who understands what it actually is going to take to do this. And we can't thank you enough for that support behind all these things. So while the cranes might not be moving, I can't even tell you how much is going on behind the scenes with our engineers. It's humbling to see how hard they're working. Amazing. Let me hand it off. I'm going to hand it off right now to the Secretary of Transportation. You're coming over?
I'm good.
Okay.
Good afternoon. I'm Paul Wiedefeld, Transportation Secretary for Maryland Department of Transportation. The Maryland Department of Transportation continues to work with the Unified Command to advance the Governor Moore's key directives as outlined. As the governor mentioned, the weather has impacted some of the salvage work, but we continue to make progress. Overall, hundreds of people from across the country and dozens of pieces of equipment are working on our unified response. And as was mentioned earlier, the contractors that we had on board went to work immediately. Thank you, Senator. That's using the $60 million that we received from the Federal Highway Administration, which allowed us to get right to work immediately. As has been said, I'm going to repeat it, we're operating at a high level of care for safety, and we will not sacrifice safety for speed. Turning to traffic coordination, the department continues to monitor and adjust the system. This morning, commuters saw higher traffic volumes and crashes with the rain, flooding, and many returning to their normal routine following spring break. I urge everyone to prepare for extra time, and please be patient and courteous to your fellow drivers. The State Highway Administration continues to deploy extra emergency response vehicles to help disabled motorists and clear crashes quickly. And we're continuing to monitor traffic and patterns as motorists shift their travel patterns in the Baltimore region. One suggestion for our highway users: before you head out, check our traffic cameras to see real-time conditions and plan your best route. You can find our traffic cameras on the website chart.maryland.gov. Governor, you continue to stress the importance of rebuilding the bridge, and I just want to make sure people do understand, with everything that you're seeing here, out there in the background, we're doing the same in planning for the rebuild of the bridge, particularly working with our Federal Highway Administration to line up everything we need to basically create a innovative and a very quick design and a building process. So in closing, our thoughts at the department are with the victims and their families. We know we mourn with you and we work in honor of your loved ones. Thank you. Senator Cardin.
Ben Cardin, Senator. First, I just want to give my impression of what a unified command should be like. This is a model unified command. It has brought together the federal partners, the state partners, our city, our county partners, all together to be united in a mission. And as a result, we've made significant progress. I want to join the governor first in acknowledging our thoughts and prayers with those 6 that lost their lives and our commitment to bring closure. That has always been our priority, and we will continue until closure is brought. Our priorities are to open the channel and to replace the bridge. Governor Moore, I want to thank you for your extraordinary leadership in this state. You have brought us all together with a mission, and you've inspired us that we will not rest until we accomplish that mission. We're going to get it done, and we're going to get it done safely. Admiral, I can't thank you enough in regards to what the Coast Guard has done, and Colonel, in regards to the Army Corps. Our partners have been here. I'm frequently asked from our federal congressional delegation, will the federal government be there with the resources that Baltimore needs? Well, look at what resources have already been made available to Baltimore. The Army Corps has had the expertise of federal agencies. They've had the money, they've had the resources, they've had the equipment. President Biden has made sure that will be done. We have the resources necessary to deal with the mission of cleaning up the channel. And as Secretary Wiedefeld says, we have the resources to start the replacement of the bridge and to deal with the challenges, transportation challenges with the bridge coming down. Next week, I have scheduled a meeting for our congressional delegation with the OMB, Office of Management and Budget, with the state of Maryland, to make sure that we coordinate in Congress with the Biden administration to make sure they have all the resources they need to complete the mission in Baltimore. We recognize that the priority now is to open the channel. We can't replace the bridge until the channel is opened, although we start planning it. But we need to make sure that we have the commitment moving forward to replace the bridge with the type of bridge befitting our community and the needs of our community. We are committed to making sure that happens. I want to talk a little bit about Trade Point Atlantic because they're making some modifications today that will help us in transition because that's before the bridge. In 2020, Senator Van Hollen and I worked to get a port grant to Trade Point Atlantic to make it more capable to deal with port activities. I want to thank again the Biden administration for being willing to modify that grant so that we can deal with what Governor Moore has talked about, the roll-on, roll-off needs of the port through Trade Point Atlantic. It's that type of flexibility, it's that type of action that is allowing us to try to mitigate the severe damage to our economy and the regional economy as a result of the channel being blocked. I want you to know it is a team effort. Senator Van Hollen and I have worked closely with the Moore administration, along with Congressman Mfume and our entire congressional delegation. Mayor Scott, thank you for your extraordinary leadership, working with your counterparts, the county execs of Anne Arundel County and Baltimore County. I had a chance earlier today to visit the small business operations in Dundalk. Excuse me, around here. And it was actually in East Baltimore. I had a chance to see firsthand how important the SBA programs will be. Make no mistake about it, small businesses are the growth engine of our economy. That's where we get job growth. They are innovative. They figure out ways to do things. When you think of the Port of Baltimore, when you think of a port, you don't necessarily think about the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of small businesses that are making that port operate. Many of the transports are done by independent contractors and small businesses. Now, they do things well, so we have an efficient port, but they don't have deep pockets. They're not prepared for this type of disaster. Administrator Guzman called me on the day of the tragedy to let me know that she believed that this would qualify for emergency assistance. She already put together a team to come to Baltimore to help us. And as soon as the state could come forward with their application, it was approved at the federal level. And it means so much. The governor talked about some of those business owners that we saw today. One has 2 employees and 2 trucks. And he'll be out of business unless he gets some help. And what we're going to be able to do through this program is give that person the hope the help that they need now, and with the traffic coming through the port, the business, so that they can stay in business. So this has been a team effort. Our federal congressional delegation, Governor, is with you. We're going to do everything to make sure you get the help that you need from your federal partners. And I want to thank all of our federal partners who have been here from day one, and they're not going to leave until mission accomplished. Governor, Mayor.
Thank you, Senator, and thank you, Mr. Governor. Good afternoon. A week ago today, our city, our state, and our region endured a massive and unspeakable tragedy. But despite the pain, Maryland and Baltimore did what we always do. We came together to support those in need and to begin the recovery from this unspeakable tragedy. I want to thank you all for continuing to be here to bring attention to this story as we work to build a Baltimore back and overcome the multitude of challenges it's posing to our city, state, and region. And of course, first and foremost, again, the thoughts and prayers of all of Baltimore will now and forever be with those who we lost. In the excitement of yesterday's progress in establishing a channel for some emergency and some commercial vessels, I don't want us to lose sight of the fact that we still have 4 Marylanders missing below the water. And we know that every single person in the Unified Command, every single first responder, everybody that is out there in front or behind the scenes is not going to forget those folks. And I know that no one up here will rest until we bring them home and provide closure to their families. Yesterday, we talked about meeting with the union members from ILA and making the same commitment to them that we made to the families, that we will always be with them to see this through alongside them. Last night, I had the opportunity to meet with business owners impacted by the port closure, some of those small businesses that Senator Cardin was just speaking about, alongside my counterparts, County Executive Olszewski and Pittman, representatives from the port, from the governor's team, Unified Command, to talk about what the outlook for their businesses look like and how we can work with them to overcome it together. The road ahead is long and difficult, but we will navigate the challenges ahead and utilize every single tool we have to support businesses and their workforces. And we'll do that the same way we've done everything since that first phone call, together, in coordination, each relying on our unique tools and assets. Everyone should know, no matter how hard it is, our city will come out stronger, our state will come out stronger, and we will be more unified and more ready for the future than we were before this unspeakable tragedy. And we'll do that by focusing on our city and state's greatest asset, our people. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Governor Moore.
For the surveying, and using what, a submersible side scan sonar, is one deployed or is it more than one? And I know that it's going to take time to do it safely, but is there a sense of when the survey might be complete?
So this, I don't know if you've heard me speak about this before, but it is an iterative process. It's not going to be that, okay, we finished all the surveys, we're complete. It's not. We are surveying after every single lift. Now, the 3D surveys that we're using, it's a COBRA system. It's a 3D multi-beam side scan survey system. We have 2 of them right now. We have multiple dive teams. All the salvage operations, there are 3 salvers that are working 3 different efforts, and they all have survey teams. We also have Corps of Engineers surveyors. Everyone is sharing their information. All the survey information is coming together. They're informing each other. They're sharing. It is truly a unified command. The information, the lessons from every lift, every pick, the conditions on the ground, what the divers are seeing. They're not going into their separate areas and working on it themselves. They are coming together to give everybody the best picture. They're creating a shared understanding of what the conditions are, what the challenges are, what they're facing. And we have an incredible asset from the Navy Supervisor of Salvage that is coordinating this for the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and creating a holistic plan for the entire effort. And what's taking place on the ground is just phenomenal, and creating the best conditions for our surveyors and our divers to be able to inform the salvage operations.
Secretary Rackaway.
Your question is regarding the 14 that were crushed? They have been accounted for. There are 14 that were crushed. Yes. So they have been accounted for. I'll have to refer to.
I'm Captain Sal Suarez, Supervisor Sergeant Diving. They have not been used yet. There are smaller cranes that are in operation at this moment for the quote-unquote smaller lifts. Really, we brought them all on station to have them in standby for when we need to go to larger lifts. Thanks.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we see is as complicated as the overwater images are. I think one thing happened is once we actually got a chance to see the submerged 3D imagery, that what we see under the water is even more complicated. That we are literally talking about mangled metal that goes to the depths of the seafloor, and also how you see it's not just on one certain area. You see it literally throughout, from the point of where the ship, from before where the ship begins, all the way down to the more shallow areas. So I think one of the things we continue to see as we continue to look through the imagery and understand the underwater imagery is the complexity is even more complex than we thought going in, just because of how submerged, how intertwined, and how mangled the metal really is. So it continues to highlight the fact that we said this was going to be a long road. This continues to confirm this is going to be a long road. It's also something that we know that there are still, as I mentioned before, there are still a lot of unknowns that we're still working to understand and dissect. We're committed to making sure we get this done. We're committed to making sure we get this done to completion, but we want to be very clear. This is not a simple operation. In many ways, this is a very unprecedented operation in the level of complexity.
So there were several things that needed to happen. The first thing we needed to do was a survey that we did in conjunction with NOAA and the Army Corps of Engineers to actually see what the depths were in that area. And then we identified a pre-existing obstruction that the state of Maryland Department of Transportation and their contractor were able to go over and basically pull that out of the water for us, which then gave us that 14-foot draft. After that, we asked the Coast Guard ACE Navigation Team under Chief Merritt to go out there and actually mark that channel so that mariners could see how to visually navigate through that section of the bridge and span and do that safely. And so those were the steps that went into it. The Unified Command reviewed all of that material after it was marked and made the decision it was safe to open that alternate channel. Similar things went into the first channel. There just wasn't an obstruction there, ma'am. Yes, that was the piece that we mentioned yesterday. Yes, ma'am. So the third channel will depend upon when we can complete the removal of the bridge obstructions in that section north of the Deep Draft Channel. So after that's completed, then we'll complete a survey and then we will mark that channel as well.
Yes, so they told us that 57 had come in and had come in online before. They were still calculating the numbers that had come in thus far for the day, but the indication that we got was that already the number was in the dozens of people. And what they were noticing was not just a flow of people who were both going online and going through the process, but a steady flow of people who are actually coming in to get their questions answered and put together in-person applications as well. So they've indicated that the flow has been steady, but the thing they also showed us is that they're prepared for it. So in fact, we were actually speaking about that when we first went in. The senator and I were asking this question. All the things that they're seeing are people who have some form of attachment to the port. So whether it is a truck driver who was running routes, using the port as an entity. Whether it was, I mentioned before about KC, who had a tire company, and some of the specific vehicles that he was making tires for were tires that were destined for either the new car placements or the vehicles that were coming into the port. So the only consistent thread that they told us they were seeing was just showing that the variance of impact that this port, that the maritime operations of the port were having on individual businesses. Thank you.
In the short term, there's no need for additional appropriations to be made. There are pots of dollars that are available that are unleashed under emergency declarations, and those funds are flowing, including in regards to the preliminaries to a new key bridge. There are agency budgets that cover a lot of these needs. They're prepared for these types of emergencies. So there's been no slowing down, and we don't anticipate any slowing down. There is a limit to how much funds are appropriated. So there comes a time when you have to replenish those funds. That goes through the normal, in many cases, the normal appropriation process is not necessarily designated to Baltimore or Key Bridge, but there are going to be funds that are going to be necessary to be replenished as a result of this type of an emergency. When you have a tragedy like this, a catastrophic event to infrastructure that has national significance, the Congress has come together to make sure the resources are there so that infrastructure can be replaced. And I want to acknowledge Senator McConnell, the Republican leader of the Senate, for his positive comments today about the federal government will be there.
Thank you. We've seen approximately 15,000 additional vehicles a day on the Fort McHenry, about 7,000 on the Harbor Tunnel. So over time, yes, that will have an impact. So what we will do is we'll monitor the condition of those facilities and make any necessary improvements to make sure that the safety of those facilities are maintained.